I tried to stay normal, but the way she looked at me made that impossible. And then she leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't pretend anymore. In that moment, I realized she already knew everything I was trying to hide. The evening begins in a calm, almost unremarkable setting. Yet everything about it feels quietly charged, like the air itself is waiting for something to happen. The male narrator arrives without expectation, moving through the space with the kind of casual awareness that comes from habit rather than intention. There are voices in the background, soft movement, occasional laughter, but none of it fully reaches him. His attention is pulled somewhere else the moment she enters his field of vision. She is not the kind of presence that demands attention loudly. Instead, she pulls in silence. She stands slightly apart from the others, positioned near the edge of the room where the light falls more gently. It softens her features without hiding them. There is a quiet confidence in the way she holds herself, shoulders relaxed, posture composed, as if she is entirely comfortable existing in her own space without needing to fill it. She is in her early 40s, but there is nothing fragile or uncertain about that fact. Instead, it adds depth to her presence, like someone who has lived through enough to no longer waste energy pretending. The narrator notices her eyes first, not just their shape or color, but the way they move, slow, observant, aware of everything without seeming intrusive. It feels like she sees people in layers rather than surfaces. And then, without meaning to, their eyes meet. It lasts only a moment, long enough for recognition, but not long enough to be called accidental. He looks away first, not because he is afraid, but because something in that brief connection feels too aware, too deliberate for something that should have been casual. Still, he feels it linger. When he glances back again, she is still there. And now, he notices something different. She is no longer just standing apart from the room. She is subtly aware of him too. Not staring, not reacting, just aware. That awareness creates the first invisible thread between them. Later, when movement shifts and people change positions in the room, they end up closer than before. Not intentionally, but inevitably, as if the space itself is slowly arranging them into proximity. A brief exchange happens, something simple, almost meaningless on the surface. Perhaps a polite greeting, a question about the setting, or a shared comment about the atmosphere. Her voice, when she speaks, is calm and controlled. There is a softness in it, but also something grounded, like she chooses every word carefully without rushing to fill silence. He responds, slightly cautious at first. His tone is lighter, but there is hesitation beneath it, an awareness that he cannot quite explain. As they speak, something subtle begins to shift. She doesn't look away quickly. She holds eye contact just a little longer than necessary, not in a challenging way, but in a way that makes him more conscious of himself, his posture, his tone, even his breathing. There is no flirtation yet, no clear intention, only presence, mutual, unspoken presence. At one point, she adjusts something nearby, a glass, a chair, an object between them, and for a brief moment, her hand passes closer to his space than expected, not touching him, but close enough for him to feel the faint awareness of proximity. It is so small that it should mean nothing, but it doesn't, because in that moment, something shifts internally, a quiet recognition that this interaction is no longer ordinary. When the conversation naturally fades, neither of them rushes to end the moment. There is a pause, a soft, suspended silence where neither fully leaves nor fully stays. And in that silence, the first real emotion is born. Curiosity, hesitation. It happens without planning. A small shift in space, a natural pause in movement, and suddenly they're closer again. Closer in a way that feels less accidental this time, as if the world is quietly repeating the opportunity until someone acknowledges it. The conversation begins with something simple, almost forgettable. A question, perhaps about the setting or something happening around them. Something polite, neutral, safe. The kind of exchange that normally dissolves within seconds. But it doesn't dissolve, because when she responds, her voice changes the quality of the air between them. It is calm, steady, and unhurried. There's a quiet confidence in it, not performative, not forced. It comes from someone who has spent years learning how to speak without needing to prove anything. The narrator answers, but even as he speaks, he becomes aware that his usual ease is slightly disrupted. He finds himself choosing words more carefully than necessary, as if the conversation has weight it didn't have a moment ago. She notices, not in an obvious way. There is no smile of recognition, no teasing remark. Instead, it is in her eyes, the subtle shift of attention that suggests she is listening not just to his words, but to the pauses between them. And those pauses begin to feel louder than speech. As the exchange continues, something unusual begins to happen. Neither of them rushes to fill silence. Instead, silence becomes part of the conversation itself. At one point, there's a moment where neither speaks for a few seconds longer than socially comfortable. In most situations, it would feel awkward. Here, it feels intentional. She doesn't break it immediately. She lets it exist. Her gaze remains steady, resting on him in a way that feels neither intrusive nor distant. It is simply present, like she is observing how he exists when he is not performing for anyone. He becomes more aware of himself in return. The position of his hands, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he tries and fails slightly to maintain normal composure. There's a subtle moment when she shifts her weight and steps just a fraction closer. Not enough to cross any clear boundary, but enough to change how space is perceived. It is not intimacy yet, but it is awareness of proximity. At one point, she lightly gestures toward something nearby while speaking, and her hand moves through the space between them. It does not touch him, but it passes close enough that he becomes sharply aware of warmth, motion, and presence in a way he cannot ignore. The gesture is casual, unremarkable, and yet it lingers in his mind longer than it should. He responds to something she says with a small, unplanned laugh, soft, slightly uncertain. It surprises even him. And for a fraction of a second, something changes in her expression. Not a smile fully formed, but the beginning of one. A quiet acknowledgement, as if she has just seen a version of him that he doesn't usually show. That moment creates a shift in the dynamic. He realizes she is not simply polite or composed. She is observant. She notices details he does not expect anyone to notice. The way he hesitates before answering. The way he looks away briefly when thinking. The way he tries to appear more collected than he feels. And strangely, instead of feeling exposed, he feels seen. The conversation naturally slows again, but neither of them fully steps out of it. There's a lingering sense that something has started but hasn't yet been named. When it finally ends, there's no clear goodbye moment, just a soft separation in space. But even as they move apart physically, the awareness does not leave, because now it is no longer just a passing interaction. It has become something that both of them will notice the next time they see each other, whether they want to or not. After that first conversation, nothing dramatic happens, at least not on the surface. Life continues in its usual rhythm. People move, talk, laugh, and go back to their routines. But for the narrator, something subtle has already shifted. The memory of her presence does not fade the way ordinary interactions do. Instead, it returns at unexpected moments, quietly, without warning. And then it starts happening again. They cross paths a second time. Not planned, not announced, just a natural coincidence in timing and space. A hallway, a shared area, a brief pause where both are forced into the same moment. This time, there is no hesitation in recognition. Their eyes meet faster. No surprise, just awareness. She acknowledges him with a slight nod, barely visible, but intentional. He responds the same way. It feels like a continuation rather than a new beginning, as if the conversation from before never fully ended. But they still do not speak much. Instead, it becomes a pattern. Small encounters begin to repeat themselves in quiet, understated ways. Not frequent enough to feel planned, but enough to feel meaningful. A passing moment where she is standing near a table, reviewing something. He walks by. Their eyes meet briefly. Neither stops, but both slow down internally. Another time, she is speaking with someone else, but mid-conversation, her gaze shifts toward him for just a second. It is quick, controlled, almost unnoticeable to anyone else. But he notices, and that is what makes it stay with him. Each encounter adds a layer, not of intensity, but of familiarity. A familiarity that is not yet comfort, but something in between curiosity and recognition. Then comes a moment that breaks the pattern slightly. He drops something small, an item that rolls or slips from his hand. Before he can fully react, she is already closer than expected. She picks it up. The movement is simple, natural, but when she straightens and hands it back, their fingers brush. It is not accidental enough to be dramatic, but it is not meaningless either. Her touch is brief, controlled, but it leaves behind a strange stillness in the air between them. He takes the object slowly, slightly aware that his hand feels different for a moment after the contact. She does not comment on it. Neither of them does. But her eyes linger just a fraction longer than usual, as if she is observing not the object, but his reaction to it. That becomes important, because from that point on, he begins to notice something else. She is not only present in these encounters. She is watching how he responds to them, not in a judging way, not in a testing way, but in a quiet, patient way, like someone learning a language without speaking it aloud. The pattern continues. They begin to anticipate each other without speaking. He notices when she enters a space before he fully sees her. She seems to register his presence before others do. Yet still, they keep a respectful distance. No forced closeness. No obvious progression. Only repetition. Only awareness building slowly over time. And with every small encounter, something unspoken grows stronger. Not attraction in its simplest form, but recognition. The kind that forms when two people begin to exist in each other's mental space without permission. The narrator starts to realize something he does not fully admit to himself yet. It is no longer about the moments when they talk. It is about the moments when they don't and still feel connected. It happens one evening when the environment feels quieter than usual, almost as if the world itself has slowed down. The noise of people fades into the background, leaving behind a softer, more intimate atmosphere where even small sounds feel amplified. The faint movement of a chair, the distant closing of a door, the subtle rhythm of breathing. They end up in the same space longer than expected. Not by design, not by arrangement, just one of those quiet overlaps where leaving feels unnecessary and staying feels natural. At first, there is silence between them. But this time is different from before. Earlier silences carried curiosity, hesitation, and awareness. This one feels heavier, not uncomfortable, but deeper, as if both of them have already sensed that something unspoken has been building for too long to remain untouched. She is the one who speaks first, not abruptly, not as if breaking tension, but softly, like someone choosing honesty over avoidance. She talks about life, not in a dramatic or emotional confession, but in a calm, reflective way. The tone is steady, but underneath it, there is something more layered. She mentions choices she made years ago, paths she followed because she had to, not because she always wanted to. There is no regret in her voice exactly, more like understanding. The kind that comes after living through enough to stop fighting what cannot be changed. As she speaks, her gaze occasionally drifts away from him, not because she is disconnected, but because she is thinking as she speaks, reliving things she does not usually put into words. The narrator listens quietly. This time, he does not interrupt. He does not try to fill pauses. He simply stays present, and that presence changes everything. Because in listening, he realizes she is not just confident or composed. There is something beneath that, something quieter, something human. A tiredness that does not come from age alone, but from carrying too much without showing it. At one point, she pauses longer than expected. The silence that follows is not awkward. It feels reflective, like both of them are standing at the edge of something deeper without stepping in yet. She exhales softly, then continues, but her voice is slightly lower now. More personal. Without planning it, she moves and sits down nearby. Not too close to feel invasive. Not far enough to feel distant. Just within a shared space where presence matters more than distance. The narrator sits too, almost instinctively responding to the shift in energy. Now they're no longer standing in a casual interaction. They're sharing stillness. Her shoulder gently brushes his when she adjusts her posture. It is accidental in motion, but neither of them corrects it. The contact is light, brief, but it lingers in awareness like warmth that doesn't immediately fade. She continues speaking, but now her words slow down slightly, as if the conversation itself has entered a different emotional pace. There is no performance in her tone anymore. No careful control of impression. Just truth, spoken in fragments of thought and memory. And he realizes something quietly unsettling. She is not just speaking to him. She is trusting him with silence between her words. For the first time, he feels the responsibility of that silence. He does not try to fix it. He does not try to guide it. He simply listens, fully, without distraction. And in that shared stillness, something subtle forms between them. Not romance yet, not confession, but emotional exposure. The kind that makes two people slightly more real to each other than they were before. When she finally stops speaking, neither of them moves immediately. The moment stretches, not because it is forced, but because neither wants to break it too quickly. In that quiet, time feels slower, heavier, more honest. And for the first time, he understands. This connection is no longer built on chance encounters. It is beginning to live in the spaces between words. After that evening, something changes, but not in a way that can be easily pointed out or explained. There is no sudden confession, no dramatic moment, no clear turning point that announces itself loudly. Instead, it is subtle, almost invisible from the outside. But between them, everything feels different. The silence they once shared casually now feels charged. Not uncomfortable, but aware, like both of them have crossed a line they cannot unsee, even if no one has named it yet. When they meet again, the dynamic is no longer neutral. It is layered. He notices it first in the way she looks at him. Her gaze is no longer just observant or curious. It carries recognition now, as if she is no longer trying to understand who he is, but confirming what she already suspects. And the most unsettling part is that he feels the same way about her. There's a quiet awareness growing between them, like an unspoken agreement that something has shifted and neither of them is going to pretend it hasn't. In one of their encounters, the atmosphere feels particularly still. They're standing closer than usual, not intentionally, but naturally, like distance has slowly been shrinking over time without either of them stopping it. She is speaking lightly about something ordinary, but her tone is softer now, less guarded, more open in a way that is difficult to define. While she talks, she glances at him more often between sentences, not as a habit, but as if checking whether he is still there with her in the moment. And he is, fully. At one point, there's a small shift in space. She reaches up, casually adjusting something near his shoulder or collar area. An instinctive gesture, almost maternal in appearance, but emotionally different in impact. Her fingers rest there just a fraction longer than necessary. It is brief, controlled, but unmistakably intentional in effect. The narrator feels his entire awareness narrow into that single point of contact. The warmth of her fingertips, the quiet pressure, the stillness of her movement. He does not step back, and neither does she. Instead, there's a pause, so small it would go unnoticed by anyone else, but for them it feels stretched, suspended. Her eyes lift to meet his immediately after. There is no surprise in her expression, only confirmation, as if she is quietly asking without words, "You felt that too, didn't you?" And he knows the answer is yes, but neither of them says it. That becomes the pattern now. Not avoidance, but mutual restraint. They're both aware, fully aware, but still choosing silence over definition, because naming it would make it real in a way neither is ready to handle. Instead, they exist in a new kind of space, one built on recognition without acknowledgement. Their conversations continue, but something has shifted underneath them. Words are lighter on the surface, but heavier in meaning. Even ordinary phrases feel layered now, as if there's always something else being said beneath what is spoken. She begins to observe him more openly, not subtly anymore. She watches how he reacts when she is close, how he responds to pauses, how he behaves when she stops speaking and simply looks at him. And he notices her noticing. It creates a loop of awareness between them, silent, continuous, inescapable. Yet still, neither crosses the final line. Because what has formed between them is not impulsive attraction. It is recognition built slowly over time. And recognition, once mutual, is far harder to ignore than curiosity ever was. By the end of their next encounter, nothing has been confessed. Nothing has changed externally. But internally, everything has already shifted into place. They are no longer two people who simply meet by chance. They are two people who now notice each other first, even in a room full of others. The moment arrives quietly, without warning, in a space that feels almost too ordinary for something so emotionally heavy to unfold. There is no dramatic setup, no clear signal that everything is about to shift. Just another moment where they find themselves alone together longer than expected. The environment is calm, subdued, soft light, faint background, noise fading into irrelevance. But between them, the silence is different now. It is no longer empty or comfortable. It is full of everything they have both been refusing to name. The narrator feels at first as tension and stillness. The way she is not speaking immediately. The way she is simply looking at him, longer than usual, as if waiting, not for conversation, but for honesty. He tries, instinctively, to act normal, to fall back into the version of himself that keeps things simple. Casual tone, controlled expression, neutral presence. The version that pretends not to notice the shift that has been building between them for days, maybe weeks. But it doesn't work anymore. Because she is not meeting that version of him now. She is meeting the real one. Her gaze stays fixed on him, calm but unshakably direct. There is no confusion in her eyes, no hesitation, only awareness, the kind that is already seen through everything he is trying to maintain. And then she moves, not suddenly, not aggressively, just a small, deliberate step closer. That single movement changes everything. The distance between them, already reduced over time, now feels almost fragile, like a final barrier that has been quietly waiting to collapse. He feels it immediately, the shift in air, the pressure of proximity, the awareness of her presence becoming unavoidable. She does not look away. Instead, she speaks. Her voice is steady, low, and unmistakably clear. Don't pretend anymore. The words land softly, but with weight that settles instantly between them. There is no anger in her tone, no frustration, no demand in the usual sense. It is something far more unsettling. Truth, the kind of truth that doesn't push, it reveals. For a moment, he does not respond. Not because he does not understand, but because he understands too well. Everything he has been holding back, the careful neutrality, the hesitation, the controlled distance, suddenly feels exposed under her gaze, as if it was never hidden in the first place. His breath slows slightly. His thoughts lose their structure. She watches him carefully, not judging, not pressuring, just observing the moment as it unfolds. Then her hand lifts slightly, not fully reaching for him at first, just hovering in that small space between them, uncertain only for a fraction of a second before making contact. Her fingers rest lightly on his arm. It is not firm, not possessive, but is grounding, intentional in its simplicity. The touch is enough to anchor the moment into reality, enough to make denial feel impossible. He does not pull away, and that becomes the answer she was waiting for. Her expression softens, not into relief exactly, but into something quieter, something almost vulnerable beneath her composure, as if she is no longer speaking to someone who is pretending, but to someone who has finally stopped resisting what he already feels. The silence that follows is no longer tense. It is heavy but honest, and in that honesty, something irreversible happens. Not a confession. Not yet. But a mutual acknowledgement that the space between them has already changed shape. And neither of them can go back to pretending it hasn't. After those words, after "don't pretend anymore," nothing explodes outwardly. There is no dramatic reaction, no sudden confession, no rushed movement to fill the silence. Instead, everything slows. The air between them feels different now. Not tense, not uncertain, but deeply aware. Like something hidden has finally been acknowledged without needing to be spoken into detail. The narrator doesn't step back. That alone changes everything. For a brief moment, he simply stands there, looking at her, as if recalibrating everything he thought he understood about distance, restraint, and emotional control. The version of himself that used to maintain careful separation feels unnecessary now, because she is still there, still close, still watching him, not with pressure, but with patience. Her expression has softened compared to moments before. The intensity is gone, but something more fragile has replaced it. Not doubt, but quiet emotional openness, as if she has already crossed her own internal line and is now simply waiting to see where he stands. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he lowers his hand, and instead of breaking the moment, he gently covers hers where it still rests on his arm. It is not a sudden grasp, not possessive, not rushed, just a quiet acceptance, a response that says more in action than words ever could. Her fingers react subtly under his touch. A small shift, barely visible, but enough to show she felt it, understood it. And then she does something equally small. She does not pull away. Instead, her hand relaxes. That simple relaxation becomes its own answer. The silence between them deepens, but it no longer feels uncertain. It feels settled, like something that has finally found its place after being unsettled for too long. She takes a slow breath, her shoulders easing slightly, as if some internal weight has loosened. The composure she always carries is still there, but now it feels more human, less guarded. He notices everything. The way her gaze softens when she looks at him. The way she no longer seems to be measuring distance. The way her presence, once so self-contained, now feels quietly shared. Without speaking, she shifts a little closer, not closing all distance, but reducing it enough that their proximity feels intentional rather than accidental. Her shoulder lightly touches his. Just that, no more. But it is enough. Enough to change the emotional temperature completely. There is no need for explanation anymore. No need for clarification or definition. Whatever had been building between them through silence, observation, and restraint has now reached a point of quiet understanding. The narrator realizes something in that moment. They were never moving toward a dramatic confession. They were moving toward this, toward mutual acceptance without performance. People nearby continue their lives, unaware of the stillness happening between them. But for them, the world has narrowed into something simpler. Not empty, but focused. Just presence. Just awareness. Just two people no longer pretending not to feel what has already been felt for a long time. She looks down briefly, then back at him, and there is something almost faintly emotional in her expression. Not sadness, not joy, but relief shaped by honesty. And for the first time, the silence between them doesn't ask for words. It replaces them. As the moment settles, nothing more needs to happen. No declarations, no questions, no uncertainty. Only quiet coexistence in the truth they have finally stopped resisting. And in that stillness, the story doesn't end with intensity. It ends with peace. And something neither of them is ready to name yet.